Captains of Industry, brought to you by Airtel.
He has a story that spans 41 years of business leadership. Dr. Bertie Lubner, the former chairman of the Lubner Group of Companies and founder of MyAfrica Tikkun, is our captain of industry tonight. Before the break, we were talking about strategies that are needed to get business and the government in South Africa working in tandem. You're more optimistic about a partnership under the Zuma administration. What are your views about this newly unveiled new growth path? You were reticent before about the role, a heavy role, for the state.
Well, let me say this, that we've had so many programs, GEAR and the
RDP.
RDP, oh, that goes back. And that's right. The RDP was a Reconstruction and Development Program. And that's what brought me to actually start looking at outreach programs, recognizing that government didn't have the skills nor the finances. And that's why I decided the private sector has to play a role.
Right.
You know, we need this new growth plan, but we need a consensus, and you'll never get full consensus. And that's why I'm pleased in one way that President Zuma has said, let's go with it. And I like Minister Patel very much. And I work very closely, fortunately, with him, as I do with others from the manufacturing circle, with Minister Davies. And it's a beautiful meeting that we have, because we sit down today and we sit as South African citizens together. Not because I'm from a company and he's from government. We're looking at the issues facing us. Particularly, obviously, in the manufacturing sector, which is really going through difficult times at the moment.
What do you identify as the problems there in the manufacturing sector? We're told we can't compete with China. We're told we don't have the skills. We're told we're not productive enough.
With all due regard to economists, you know, we've got two hands and two ideas, and you've got to make up your own mind. The fact is that today the manufacturing sector in this country is highly efficient. It's had to be. We've had to shed jobs tragically. We've had to survive against the onslaught of heavy competition. Our currency is so strong and gaining strength. So in our competitiveness externally, we are not competitive. With products coming into the country, we can't be competitive, because you can call it dumping, you can call it whatever you like, because you can't identify exactly. But the fact of the matter is, take the issue you raise of China. We are private sector companies competing with state-controlled companies who can subsidize, not can, do subsidize, do everything to assist and make sure that their exports are competitive. Because they've got such a huge domestic base that also makes them competitive. So we've got to work together with government in looking at programs for this country. We've got to broaden our domestic base, for example.
What sort of programs are we talking about here? You talk about the Chinese state subsidizing their manufacturing industry. Would that be a way?
Well, you know, I think we need to talk closer together with government on ways of making South Africa more competitive. Short-term incentive programs for exports, for example. Very advanced skills development programs for us. Assistance in low-cost, cheaper money to finance modernization, etc. Because companies have not got the reserves anymore in trying to fight this recession. So we've come to the limits where we can cut employment any further. The next step is virtually closing companies down. So we need to get together with government. Never mind overarching policies, is to sit down and be in specific areas and say, this is what we need. The strong currency has helped us, obviously, with inflation. So there's always two sides to every story. But you know, sometimes one story is more important in the history of a country than another.
The story that's very important in South Africa is that of overriding unemployment, and you referred to that earlier on. 25% unemployment, a huge skills deficit, so problems by way of preparing South Africans to participate in this economy. It's also a hangover of apartheid that you referred to earlier on. But as we go forward, what would be tactical ways of dealing with this one?
Well, you know, there aren't short-term remedies, unfortunately. But there's certainly short-term action plans where people sit around together. You know, the biggest thing we need to give people is hope. And you only give people hope when they know that tomorrow is going to be better than today. I think there's some statement which says, you know, yes to tomorrow, no to repeated yesterdays. We've got to find it. I mean, it's insane to believe that if we just keep doing the same thing, that things are going to change. It's not going to change. So we've got to get, as a matter of urgency, an attitude together with government on what are the short-term things we can do to give people immediate belief that there is hope for tomorrow, where they can be fed, that their children can be fed. I mean, in the organizations that I'm involved in, far wider than Africa Tikkun, you can't believe just even in this last year the amount of needs that families are having. Okay, there's social benefits and so on, but those are palliatives, they're not cures. So we've got to sit down and make sure that we understand the dynamics we're facing in a global world. And sometimes we're going to have to take some tough decisions. Maybe corporates that are not globally competitive or can never be may have to close. But then let's reinforce those that can. And the other thing is, let's start attracting people and investment into this country. You don't do it just by sitting by and saying we're nice guys. You've got to have a direct strategy, because you've got to have a marketing strategy. You've got to say what is possible that can be incorporated into this country that is viable and profitable for an industry to be developed here. And when we've defined it, let's go out and find the right people.
As you mentioned this, South Africa has been invited to the Heads of State Summit of the BRIC countries, and already we're starting to debate, was it a warranted decision? Does South Africa qualify to be a BRIC member state? And if South Africa is part of the BRIC countries, what is South Africa, and indeed Africa, going to gain from this? Is this a way of China using South Africa as a gateway into the rest of Africa? What do you have to say to all of it?
You know what? Everybody in life has got self-interest. That's fine, as long as those self-interests can become joint interests. Sure, China's interest, obviously, is not just because we can add so much to the whole BRIC. It's specific situations. We've got raw materials that they want. There's a market here, an increasing market, not only here, but in Africa. So South Africa is the first stage of bringing Africa in, which I'm so delighted. Just aside, I'm going back to the World Economic Forum again. And I wanted to say, you know, when I went there 22 years ago, the only part of Africa on the agenda was as a basket case. It didn't deserve any part of the economics. It was more on the philanthropy side. Today, Africa is being viewed as the next major growth point besides the Far East, with a change that's taking place from Europe, USA, to that part of the world. So I think we're going to be entering into the most exciting era. And that's why I think the BRIC countries have recognized not only the potential of South Africa, but Africa. But let's face it, what is there going to be a short-term benefit? Yes, reputation. You know, if you're brought into a club that everybody thinks is good, so that membership. Is there going to be short-term benefits? Will we get increased exports to those countries? This is what I want to see, what will come out. What guys are you going to buy from us? Are we competing with the European Union, who look after each other? If you're going to look after us, we're going to look after you type attitude.
Beyond South Africa in the world is your relationship with Israel, and the work that you've done through the Ben Gurion University, research, outreach. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I went to get involved with the university, I was just amazed that in a new state, this was 35 years ago, that already they were understanding as a country that they did not have the raw materials to develop themselves other than brain power. So they had to survive through the use of technology, how to live in the desert. And I was amazed at the things they were doing on the use of water, of the potential of solar energy. And that excited me, because I said, here in South Africa, we've got similar needs. So if I can bring together the elements, never forget the politics, there was no politics involved in it. It was pure and simple. Can the two countries, by working together, add value to science, to research, which is not only localized, but is international? So that was my main thing. Then my joy of watching a university grow in the desert, which today is recognized to be one of the top universities in the country.
Okay. What informed your decision was innovation, not politics. But increasingly, politics has to make you think a little, because there is a growing conversation about Israel and where it comes from as a nation of oppressed people, and Israel's behavior towards the Palestinians. As a South African, operating in that environment where there are resonating themes of oppressor and the oppressed, what does your conscience tell you?
You know, my conscience tells me that I can't live by day-to-day situations. I can be sorry, I can be sympathetic to things. I rather look at solutions. Regrettably, what one could call human rights issues that really do apply both sides. I don't care in an argument if somebody is 75% right and 25% wrong, or vice versa. It's why is it happening and what are the outcomes? And if there's goodwill, and goodwill means an understanding of a right of people to live a normal, happy life. People who can, children who can say, I don't want to inherit what I've inherited from my parents. And this is both sides. So unfortunately, war or conflict brings about all sorts of things. So am I happy about human rights issues that are on the Palestinians, what happened in Gaza and elsewhere? No, how can I? How can I say, no, I'm not concerned that 1,000 deaths took place? Can I say I'm not concerned about where the rockets are coming across? I believe we all need to be concerned, rather to find solutions, rather than trying to find, condemning attitudes. I'm very opposed, for example, to boycotts. What do boycotts say? Boycotts say, you know what, we're going to go further and further apart. Conflict. Why not work together? Why not have South Africa, for example, Israel, the Palestinians working together? And this is what I'm trying to do, frankly, with my relationship with the universities here, is increasingly in contact with Israeli institutions and Palestinian universities for the good of people, not for political reasons.
Thanks so much to you, Bertie Lubner. It's been wonderful having you. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. I really do. I've enjoyed it.
Bertie Lubner, a doyen of South African business, a philanthropist, advocate for peace in the Middle East. That's all for this edition of Captains of Industry.